we mentioned today is going to be circulated by email to the email that you registered with. So as we wait for a few more of our people to join us, I'd like to share a little about the Georgian Bay Biosphere with you. We're one of 18 UNESCO World Biospheres in Canada. Our region is ecologically unique with the largest freshwater archipelago on Earth. So the biosphere stretches 200 kilometers from the Severn River in the south to the French River in the north, and it was designated in 2004. We're a registered charity. We have an office in Parry Sound, and we rely on grants, partnerships, and donations to do our conservation and education work. So since 2014, the Township of the Archipelago has held an active partnership with the Georgian Bay Biosphere to provide environmental programming to ratepayers. So this has included a range of different things from water quality monitoring coordination, forest health work, guided hikes, kids programming, and in 2020, it now includes webinars. So we'd like to acknowledge the land also before we begin. The Georgian Bay Biosphere is situated within the treaty territories of Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850 and the Williams Treaty of 1920, and located on Anishinaabe territory. Our organization, under UNESCO, acknowledges the rights of Indigenous peoples in this territory and works towards respectful and reciprocal relationships as we are all caretakers of the land. So for the meat of our presentation, I will now turn things over to Georgian Bay Biosphere's General Manager, Greg Mason. Hello, Greg.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody's having a good day wherever you are. I've been the general manager here at Georgian Bay Biosphere since 2009. Prior to that, I was a former municipal planner, and now I do mostly environmental planning, strategy, and management work in this coastal region, with a really big focus on strengthening partnerships and collaborations between municipal, First Nation, and other levels of government and NGOs. The presentation today is really in three relatively short parts, I think. The first is looking at what makes up a classic septic system. The second is really when things go really wrong, which fortunately they don't do a lot of. And the third is just general care strategies that you can adopt at your home or at your cottage, wherever your septic system is located. Perhaps it's both. There is a caveat here. I'm not a designer. There are very qualified individuals, both professionally and at the township levels, where you can get specific design ideas and advice. And so that the purpose of today is not really to design all 53 attendees on this webinar your system. So it's really just around good use and general practices. I will do a call out to the municipal building departments because they do provide a great level of expertise and support to you as ratepayers in a variety of different ways with respect to your septic system, both the care and the maintenance, but also the design, and reach out to them if you have very technical questions after this call. And as well, we've been getting emails in advance and I've been responding to them, and we're happy to entertain emails. And if there are questions that we don't answer today, we'll follow up in that follow-up email that Delana talked about with the best answer or resource that we can have. Just before I carry on any further, I'm going to stop my video shortly, but if you have questions, I do encourage you to put them into the Q&A box so that we can answer. We will pause on occasion throughout to try to answer those questions for you, and we'll go from there. So, all right, here we go. So it's important to kind of set a context of why do we care? And for me, at a really big level, we care because this region, or maybe it's just your piece of paradise at your cottage or your house, is special to us in a lot of different ways. So whether we live here, cottage here, are new, or have been here for multiple generations, this place pulls at our heartstrings and it calls us to take care of it. At a more concrete level than that region, perhaps, a lot of us want to look after our septic systems because we're worried about the water quality related to downstream of that septic systems. So at a basic level, we want to ensure that the waters adjacent to our cottages and our homes are swimmable, that they're drinkable, and that they remain fishable. we're fortunate in our region in that most water quality monitoring and research indicates that the septic pollution is not currently a significant challenge for our healthy waters, although it is something that we want to keep on top of. We want to ensure that our best septic practices continue to keep that water quality in a high level, or not, that those practices aren't contributing to negative water quality. Septic maintenance is one of those things that is in our control. And so we can take a precautionary approach, do a good job of looking after it. But when we think about our cottaging or our house, the routes that we travel to our place, the roadways, all of our physical structures and associated services are arguably the only places, are the places we have the greatest impact, but they're also the places we have the greatest control. We can get a handle on our footprint at our cottage by looking after our space in a good, ecologically friendly way. Our sewage treatment system is a major component of that. How we construct them, where we put them, what we put into our septic systems, how much water and sewage we put down into them, and then how we look after them for the 20 or more year life cycle for those systems. Those are all important things that we can do to control and look after our environment. There's also I think a significant financial investment and a financial perspective here, which is that you might pay anywhere from $8,000 for a really easy road access one to over $20,000 for a water access septic system. These are a significant service that is provided and a significant expense that you're going to go into. Now, it's really not that much more expensive than what you pay on a monthly, municipal sewage if you amortize it over the entire lifespan of your septic system. But you can also, by not treating your septic system well, curtail that lifespan, and you can be looking at an $8,000 to $15,000 bill much sooner than needed. And so, looking after that is very much has a financial picture as well. When we talk about our septic systems, they're designed with a couple of key purposes in mind. They're designed to separate the solids from the wastewater flow that are coming from your house or your cottage. They're designed to allow for the decomposition of any accumulated solids. And then they're designed to pass that clarified wastewater into a drain field for further and final treatment. And this is a biological process. And I want to emphasize that as we go on, is that your septic system is in effect a breathing, living, functioning organism, and so you want to treat it as you would a living, functioning organism. And if all of a sudden you're putting chemicals or pollutants down, well, then those are things that aren't really good for functioning organisms, and so we want to be mindful of that. But there's also something that I find a lot of folks get confused about, which is that septic systems are designed to remove nutrients and control nutrients from getting into the environment. And that's not really the case. That's not their design purpose. And so from an environmental perspective, yes, you want to look at after your septic systems from a human health perspective, but you can also do things like looking at phosphate-free soaps to ensure that you're also doing a good by the environment, or better by the environment, with respect to things that the septic system really isn't designed to look after. I'm going to go through it. There's a number of different types of approved sewage treatment type systems under the Ontario Building Code. Here are two of them. The outhouse on the left, if designed well with a right setback and so that critters can't get into them, are a really good way. And I would argue that actually a septic system, because of the reduced amount of water that's flowing through them, might arguably have the best environmental or the least environmental impact of many of our sewage treatment systems. And just a plug on, for designing them well, this is at my personal family cottage down the south end of Georgian Bay. We designed it big enough so that we can get kids in there and help them out. The kids weren't freaked out. There's lots of light and good airflow, and so they're not as scary as some of the ones that I might have participated or used in my youth, and so they're fine for people to use. And again, you get a good amount of airflow, and they're not smelly, and they function quite well. The gray water pit on the right is simply for looking after your gray water needs. So that's your maybe a shower, your kitchen sink, anywhere, or like some flow from a composting toilet if that's what you have in your system, and they are designed basically to receive those wastes and then disperse the water and have it through oxygenated soil basically be treated and look after any of sort of the biological oxygen demand of the wastewater going through that grey water pit. Grey water pits are only good for a certain size, so and they're designed. I think the maximum design is around 1,000 liters that you can build per day as max in Ontario. And at a certain point, as my understanding is that if you get to a certain volume, you might as well, for the cost and the size of it, go to what we'll talk about in a short while, which is the standard septic system that most of us are thinking about. Another class of system. Another class of system is with respect to holding tanks. So there are a number of older cottages that where, for whatever reason, either was allowed at the time or there wasn't space at the time, and they put this in, are holding tanks. And they are designed to hold your sewage until you pump it out. You're required to do your pump outs on a regular basis when the tank gets full, or hopefully before it gets full, because otherwise then you're really stuck. And then that pumped material is taken to a municipal sewage lagoon by those qualified haulers. And so my understanding is that these aren't permitted on new builds, but I've got a picture of an RV here with a holding tank, and while a holding tank at a cottage would likely be larger, this gives you an idea. This is just to hold the sewage until you get it pumped out. We'll go back and we'll answer the questions with regard to outhouses. There are regulations in terms of how they're designed and installed, including the setback from the water, which is 20 meters, and they have to be designed in a way that critters and animals can't get to them. They have to be designed, i.e., in the ground, and so a building inspector can't come by and see waste flowing over the ground. So everything has to be kind of contained inside them. To be honest, you don't want the waste flowing out over the ground either. So then the class 4 sewage treatment system is what most of us, the majority of the systems that are out there in cottage country, are this kind of a system. And that is, you've got your plumbing in your house, and you have your plumbing in your house, and then all of that plumbing flows into a septic tank, which collects and does a certain amount of treatment. And then from the septic tank, then once the sludge is separated in the septic tank, then you get your water flow into your leaching field, where that final treatment through oxygenation happens. And so that's the basic design. There are different sizing that has to happen depending on your cottage size, the number of bedrooms, the number of fixture units that you have in there, and then so that we'll go from there. The class 4 systems, just make sure I'm on the right side. Like I said, so the wastewater enters the septic tank. You get your separation of liquids and solids occurring in that first chamber. So as you're looking at the image on the left, the solids are floating to the top. They produce a useful scum, which helps in keeping the odors under control. And then the heavier solids do sink to the bottom, where they form a sludge layer. And there's some decomposition of that sludge layer once it's down there that happens. And then it goes into a second chamber where a little bit more settling happens, but mostly you get your wastewater flowing then out the outlet through an effluent filter if it's installed, and into your leaching field. So an effluent filter, for a number of us, where we've got septic systems, if they were designed before a certain amount of, if they're a certain age, they may not have an effluent filter, but this is an effective way of lengthening, extending the life of your bed and improving the effectiveness of your septic system, but they do need to be cleaned out regularly. Excuse me. Which means that you need to have good access to your septic systems. So then a couple more points on class 4 systems. We talked about risers, so a number of these are also now required on septic systems to basically create an access panel to your tank that is easily accessible. A number of older systems, again, they don't have these, but you can retrofit them to make it easier to access and assess the health of your system, and also determine how much sludge has been accumulated in your tank. And this last one is that included in Class 4 systems are a number of tertiary systems, which basically is a tertiary system is a further treatment that happens after the tank to the wastewater that further improves the quality of that wastewater before it's released to the environment. And there are a number of different types and a number of different designs that are approved for use in Ontario. Many of these are if you've got awkward building sites and you need to configure it, or you want to reduce the size of the field perhaps in little ways, then you can go to these kinds of designs. And they also will have alarms and like regular maintenance that's needed on them, and you need to make sure that you're doing those maintenance, because otherwise they stop functioning. But they do provide improved effluent quality for the environment. All right. So I got a couple of questions that I'm just trying to figure out how I got a couple of questions that have come up. How far from the shoreline do grey water pits and outhouses need to be? So it's 20 meters. Is generally required. Some municipalities may, because of their zoning, ask you to be further back depending on where you are. So you want to check with your building departments before building. On the grey water pits, outhouses, you don't need a building permit for, but you still need to follow you need to follow the regulations of 20 meters. So yes, there's a question here around grey water pits and doing multiple grey water pits. You are able to do multiple grey water pits, so yes, it is cheaper at a certain amount. My understanding on this is around the size is that it gets to be awkward in terms of the amount of size. So you might still be better to go with a septic system, but yes, you can do multiple grey water pits. Yes, and again, on composting toilets, there are some that are designed to be waterless, so they've got fans in them that deal with any excess overflow water, so you don't necessarily need to tie it into a grey water pit. Yeah, so we're going to get to pump outs. There's a question from Tracy: do septic tanks need to be pumped out? And if so, how do I know when? So we will talk about that in a little while. Really quickly, yes, it's advised that you pump out your septic tanks on a regular basis. The timing on that is subject to question. So if you get online, most people will say, anywhere from I've read 3 to 5 years, but I would say that's for where you have a dwelling that's heavily used, and you might be able to stretch it to 7 years. If you're a cottage where you're only using your place, say 2 to 3 weeks of the year, you may be able to extend the timeline. The rule is, though, that there's sludge that accumulates in the bottom of your tank, and if it accumulates to 1/3 or more, then yes, you are required to have it pumped out when the sludge gets to 1/3, and that's because that sludge is taking up space for when the wastewater is coming in. And if you get too much sludge, then you don't have enough time for the wastewater, for the solids to separate out of the wastewater in the first place, and then those solids start going into the tank or into the field, and they can begin plugging up the field. So pump out, around 1/3 is the 1/3 volume of sludge is the ideal timing. Carrie, I'm going to have to defer on in terms of other dry systems that are approved. If you're talking about a composting toilet, so I might follow up with you later, Carrie, just to get some clarification on that question, if that's okay, and make sure I'm giving you the right answer. Right. So the next question is around, again, around how often should it be pumped out, and then laundry and dishwasher use. When we take a look at the composition of our wastewater, or sewage water, it is mostly water that's flowing in there with, you know, soaps and detergents, and yes, human feces that goes in there. And I think I have a slide coming up that gets at this. So, you know, if you're doing an excessive amount of laundry and an excessive amount of water coming in, you know, I've heard that it's not ideal, but at the same time, like, I think if you're regularly, you know, using your toilet, which most of us are, you should be fine. So hopefully that answers the question. That question. My understanding is, you know, it should not pump out the septic sludge if it's below 1/3. Yeah, so I think the rule is you get to 1/3 and then you want to pump out, and then you'll develop that sludge again. You don't want it to get excessively high into your tank. All right, we have a couple of more polls, I think, Delana, that.
Yeah, Greg, there, you can pull them up just at the bottom of your screen there.
Oh, I can do it. Oh, look at that. All right, so here's a couple questions for you. We're going to launch this one. It's just the general knowledge. Don't be shy. We're just kind of curious. How confident are you in where your septic system is located? Because that's a big piece. And that when we talk about our septic systems, we're including everything. Where's your sewage line? Where's your tank? What's the extent of your field? And while we're doing this poll, I can only tell you that when we bought our house that's on a septic system, I was really confident of where the tank was. I was really confident where the field was, or sorry, I was semi-confident of where the tank was, and I was really confident where the field was. And it ended up being a pretty bad mistake because I ended up, when I was digging for the tank, broke through my sewage line. So that's why it's helpful to find out. Awesome. So in that poll, that's great. 93% know exactly where all parts of your septic system are. So you're already way better than me, and that's just fine. I know really well now where my line is, so that's all good. And then the next question we're just going to ask is, when was your last septic pumped out? And a question did pop up while we were here, when it's 1/3 full. And just to know that, you know, one way is if you open up a hatch, you can put a stick down and determine it. This is also one of those ones where, so in my own personal, you know, I've got a family of 4. We got it pumped out after 5 years after we owned the house, and I can tell you that the sludge was basically not at 1/3, but it was useful because when the septic haulers were there, when they're doing the pump out, they were able to inspect my tank and make sure that all the pieces were fully functioning when it was there. And that's where, I mean, when we get to what's the ideal timeline, if you're a full-time, full-use, you know, house or cottage all year round, then that sort of 4 to 7 year timeline is useful, because then you're getting somebody who probably knows more than you do to come in and have a look at your system, and answer any questions that you might have. I'm getting, there we go. Delana's in just helping me make sure I'm sharing poll results with you. So your last pump out 1 to 2 years ago, 3 to 5, I've never pumped it out, unsure. So, you know, those are, and 5 to 10 years ago was less. So that's, you know, that's pretty good. Now here's the question on septic location. So there's the results. Sorry, I didn't share that with you last time. There's the results in terms of location. So a good number of you know the locations of your system. Well done. All right, so we'll say goodbye to my young son, Ben. All right, so next we're going to just talk about some of the examples of problems or failures and what to do about them, how to prevent them, and those kind of things. So different things that emerge, and I suspect it'll be a number of questions that come up during this. I will say that, when I've spoken with building inspectors and septic installers, that the number of significant or major problems is not that high in cottage country. So yeah. This first one is giving you a picture here of where is my septic. So it's like, we're basically looking at forest floor. Small saplings have grown up here. There's trees in there, and really having no idea where it is. And so this leads to questions about sort of just general field maintenance repair. So we'll get questions around what is safe to plant. And really the answer, the best cover is grasses and clover. So you want shallow rooted plants that are favoring dryish conditions. Some people will plant, if you plant something that is deeper rooted and or is really good at finding moisture, then they can fill in and go in and actually fill the septic field lines in. So that's things like roses and blackberries and raspberries, shrubs. You want to be careful about how close to your system you're planting trees, because some trees' roots are very good. Like we can think about maple trees that are, really awesome at finding water. They'll go in, and again, they can disrupt your septic field. And so yes, it's one of those things that we've had a lot of questions come through our office around what's safe to plant on top. And a lot of people want a more naturalized setting. They don't like looking at grasses, and clover. But there's really good reason to have something shorter on your field. You can take a look and see if you're getting uneven growth over vegetation growth. That might be a sign that one or two of your runs isn't working properly, and you're getting more flow into a single or only one or two of your runs. You're not getting even dispersion, or it's an indicator that things are clogged. And so if you have grasses or clover on your bed, you can actually see that better than you'd never be able to tell through these ferns. So yes, so unfortunately with our septic fields, we probably want to favor something that doesn't look as natural as the forest around everywhere else in the place, and you want to do a good job of trying to maintain that. We'll just answer the question: can chipmunks burrowing in the septic field cause problems? I'm sure they can, and you just again want to continue monitoring. So if you can try to get them not doing it, but I mean, good luck on that. So native flowers, many native flowers can be okay. You just want to go and talk to a gardener, or your florist shop around how deep the roots are in there. Mainly because there are some native plants that are deep rooters, and they'll go in and they're really good at finding moisture, and they're really good at finding moisture through root drought conditions, which a lot of our hot dry summers. And the way they do that is by having deeper roots. So you just want to be careful on that front. So this one, basically you've got a septic system here, a tank that is like chock full of sludge. And so this will be like no pump out for 20 years. So yes, it's required. The timeline to reach the size is highly variable. And so people are looking for that, obvious number or the amount of time. So it's going to depend on how big your system is, how many people are living in your house, how heavily used, how you treat it. We'll get into that. So what are you putting, if you're putting a lot of vegetable matter down your kitchen sink, and so that 5-year timeline for a full year round used residence makes good sense. All right. Vivian, I'm gonna have to get you back to you on wild thyme. I'm not a great plant person. Delana might be able to jump in. She knows more than me. The ant hills, probably not. Yeah, so again, not looking at your system. The next question around septic bed grass growing unevenly, favoring a closest run. Often there's a distribution pipe that on the outlet of a septic tank, and sometimes they get, whether it's frost or what have you, they get kicked out of levelness, and will favor one over the other. So yes, it's something that you may want to have a look at. It may just be the type of vegetation that you have there. So there is one last thing on this slide here I meant to say is just we want to, well, I'll get to it, but anyway, we want to be careful of what we're not parking and compacting our septic bed. So you don't want to be driving on it, using it as a driveway. You don't want to be parking your boats on it or accessing those kind of things. You know, if you've got a soccer team as a family, you may not want them, you know, playing soccer every day, 9 to 5 on your septic bed. Go from there. This is just a slide in here. So a basic design math for a septic system, you know, and the point here is more around reserve capacity. So if you've got a 3-bedroom cottage with a class 4 septic system, it's roughly, you know, designed to be treating 1,600 liters in a 24-hour period. You know, the average person will put in 200 liters per person. That's 1,200 liters. So if all of a sudden, if you've got more people, you know, having a party at your cottage, it's like double that much. The amount of reserve room in your tank is not that high. So you need to be mindful for, you know, of those weekend parties. And maybe that's where you have a backup, you know, outhouse in your system. And this is why. So here's a septic tank that was found and stopped, and you know, we had sewage flowing back into their cottage after in the middle of a party weekend, and it was just basically everything was flooded and overwhelmed. The other way that this can happen is through design creep, and so if you add in bedrooms or add in bathrooms or other components into your cottage or house after the septic system was approved, and you haven't upgraded your septic system, well, then you can slowly have that house creep beyond the capacity of the septic system. And that's really why building departments are there, is they will look at what you're planning to do and assess whether or not your current septic system is designed for what you're proposing to do in your house. So it's best to be mindful of that. This one is where the tank really had, there was no baffle in the tank, so the tank had actually broken, and there was the sludge wasn't allowed to separate. Basically, you're getting straight flow of sludge into the field, and here again is where a regular pump out can help to catch these problems. And then as well, if you have an effluent filter, if you're doing annual maintenance or biannual maintenance of your annual or twice yearly maintenance of your effluent filter, you can begin to catch these things as well, or whoever's doing that work for you can. And then this is a form of design creep. So somebody's just built their deck right over top of their septic tank and a portion of the field in this case. And again, they're causing some significant problems. And also it's just when you have to go to access your tank, you can't. So you want to be careful where you're building. So it's awesome that I think it was 93% of you knew where your tanks were located. So, or your systems were located, pardon me. So you won't build by mistake over top of it. So there's been a couple of questions around this, around uneven lines. So again, this you can see exactly where the tiles are running in this septic bed. So you've got areas of long grass and uneven growth. They're getting fed well. So a septic tile field will have a life capacity in the sense that it will begin to have the ability to have the wastewater infiltrate into the soil reduced, and that can cause nutrients to kind of bubble up closer, or sort of the wastewater and its nutrients bubble up closer to the surface and be available to those nearby grasses. The other one is that, I don't think it's this case, but somebody was asking about where I can see one run going really well. And again, that might be just something that's been knocked out of place and you're getting most of your flow into that one run. So in this case, it's quite likely that a new leaching field is required. We got a couple new polls, and we got time for questions. So I'll just go back. Somebody's asking, is it safe to walk on top of the septic systems and grow edibles? So the first question, walking on top, yes, it's safe to walk on top of your septic systems. They're designed for that. It is not advised to grow vegetables on top of a septic system. And again, So there's that. There's been a lot of commentary around Class 4 septic systems and their compatibility with Canadian Shield, and there's been different research that's been done on the effectiveness of septic systems on the Canadian Shield, and to no solid conclusion on that. And then we also have a choice for tertiary systems that may be more appropriate, but at this time the province of Ontario is still permitting Class 4 systems. Does having a pump out to move wastewater up there? Donald, I don't believe it does in terms of the capacity or ability to manage volume, because basically I think you're going to have a pump chamber with a pump tank. When it gets full, it triggers a switch and off it goes up into the tank. You might be running into, like, if you're doing a lot of pump outs, just burning out your pump. So I've heard people having backup pumps available for them, and also making sure that your alarm is functioning well, because there should be an alarm basically if things aren't going well and aren't pumping up, because otherwise it'll start backing up on you. Lifespan for septic bed, and again, it's a really hard question, and there's no definitive answer. The design lifespan is anywhere kind of from 20 to 25 years, but there are plenty of systems that are older than that that are continuing to function quite well, and that probably has to do with how they were treated, Donna, but it also probably has to do with how much use they're getting. So I mean, we have seasonal cottages that are being used sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks a year, and then they're lying dormant for the fall, winter, and spring. So they simply aren't getting the volume of flow that other systems are, and they're probably not being mistreated, by people. Likely less mistreatment, or the less volume of mistreatment that's happening that allows for those beds to last a bit longer. But I would say that if you're getting into an older system, having qualified septic installer come in and look and do an inspection is good practice. Again, that's about looking after our system and looking after the special place. I will, Christian, I will do a bit more research around some of the prices, but again, that's going to depend significantly on the size, the location, whether it's water access or not. I mean, there will be ranges there, but yeah, certainly we can give you some ranges. Yeah, my understanding on additives, so there are additives on the market for sure. My understanding is that they aren't really needed to extend the life of your septic system. So you are, for the most part, your human activity in your dwelling is adding the bacteria that your system needs. There's not really a need to add more, and so so I've heard of people doing it. Sometimes they'll do it because they feel more comfortable with that. But I don't believe it's necessary, and probably just costing you money. But if it makes you sleep better at night, then go for it. Rupert, I'll follow up with you around the specifics on permitted alternatives. Around adding raw meat pieces, again, not really necessary, and in fact, like kitchen waste and avoiding putting kitchen waste in is a way that you can extend the life of your septic, and also reduce how long until pump out, because you're putting less of that solid material in that then has to be dealt with. Human waste is pretty chock full of bacteria, so you're getting the bacteria that you need in there. Yeah, cleaning products, you want to be careful. Those are, organic, environmentally friendly cleaning products are probably the best way to go. And mainly it's any of those harsh chemical-ful ones that are, antibiotics. So antibiotic, which is like basically, killing life. That's what they're designed to do. Aren't really awesome, because then if they get in volume into your septic system, then they're reducing that bacterial load in there. We'll get into this in a little bit as well. Yeah, for sure. So with the rising levels on Georgian Bay and where your system was designed, you for sure want to have a look at where your septic is located and all parts of that septic system, and for sure address that if it's starting to hamper the function of that. So that's something you want to talk to a septic installer about, and follow up with them. Yeah, thanks for that. So 30,000. Right on. Thanks, Donald, for that. Okay, so we've got some more polls for some materials coming up. I'm trying to remember which ones I've done. Here we go. We were just curious about who we've got on the phone call, and so in terms of how often you use your system. All right. So it's interesting. We got some full-time residents up here, almost 50, all close to 50%, 10 to 20 weeks. So long extended seasons. That's great. And then some that are less than 10 weeks and wish they could be more, I'm sure. So that's so for me, that's a really good indicator. So if you're taking a look at that, you've got some of the heavier use. So those of you that are sort of that full time into 10 to 20 weeks, or if you're a little bit more than that in a year, you'd want to be probably a little bit more attentive to how full your septic tank is getting, and just pump it out more regularly. All right. This is around what you can put down, what you should be putting down your drain, or shouldn't go down the drain. Which of the following materials shouldn't go down your drain? All right, we're gonna end that there. Share results. So your knowledge is pretty solid, folks. So yeah, for sure, paper towels are brutal and not breaking down. I will share something about the as well here while we're on this poll around those one-time use wipes that say that they break down. I was just reading an interesting study last night where they said toilet paper breaks down within 10 to 15 seconds of getting, not breaks down, but breaks apart into tiny pieces. Whereas those one-time use wipes take a lot longer to break apart, and so while they might be biodegradable, they probably don't get a chance to fully degrade. So they're best not to be flushing down. Coffee grounds, same kind of thing. Like that's great. Ideally, you're not putting coffee grounds down. Again, that's physical material that likely won't get a chance to break down. It's just filling up your tank faster than is really needed. The other one I can do a call out for coffee grounds is that it's an amazing in your compost. It degrades really quickly, and it's really good for your soil. Biodegradable soaps, yep, they're good to go. Cat litter, nope, don't try not to flush that down. Paints, absolutely not. So really not ideal. Those are kind of contaminants. Same kind of around the feminine hygiene products with other things we've talked about, just things that don't degrade. My understanding on use is that you should be okay to push it down unless you're putting like large volumes down. So good to go. Okay. Just going to move on. Oops, try to move on. Go back. Sorry, thanks around the intel around the cost for the gray water pit. That's really helpful. And should be use 1, 2, 3 tanks to be able to store more waste frequent than yeah, I'm not seeing that happen. I mean, I think if you are designing your septic system, including the tank size to accommodate the size of your house and the number of rooms and all that, that goes into the design, that what's there will do a good job. So. Oh, sorry, I can go back to that. So just a breakdown in terms of wastewater contribution. So toilets are about 45%. You know, this is on average, of course. Baths and showers 30%, laundry 20%, and then you know, drinking and kitchen use of water is about 5%. And then, you know, within your wastewater, we have this definition of black water versus gray water. So your toilet, so human waste, urines, the toilet paper, and the water associated with it is considered black water. Anything like greases and oils, food scraps, and, you know, soils, hopefully not chemicals into your septic systems, and water associated with the kitchen is also considered here black water, although you can put that into a gray water pit. And then other things in terms of your, you know, a bathtub and shower, you know, well, your laundry, that's considered to be gray water. And some of these you want to eliminate from septic systems. So like chemicals as an ideal, you want to reduce or eliminate those in. So in terms of managing our septic system, again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. This is a living system. It requires biological activity to function. And so when you're looking at what you're putting in, you want to be mindful that you're trying to promote that biological function. And also you're trying to give the system time to deal with the waste. And so a couple of different things that you can do in terms of the inputs from your house or cottage. Limiting your flows. So, you know, low flow water, low flow shower heads, and all that. You know, if you have at your cottage, you have a dishwasher, then there are also water saving dishwashers and all those kind of things that can minimize the amount of flow. If you're at the end of a weekend that you've had a bunch of people up, you know, you could hold off on doing the laundry maybe for a day or two to let the system rest, and then, you know, do some laundry, as opposed to like just dumping, you know, lots and lots and lots of water at your septic system all at one time. So you can kind of spread that load out. Reducing your solids is really important. So just, you know, getting into the practice of scraping your plates, you know, into either your compost or your garbage or whatever is needed. Avoiding grease and fats, because they can kind of cap that scum layer and reduce the amount of oxygen that's in there. Carburetors are a big no-no. Again, that's just taking solids and like dropping it, basically filling up your pail, if you will. And like I said about those Lysol or baby wipes, even if they say they're flushable, it seems that it would be best to avoid flushing them. And then being bacteria friendly, so no poisons, trying to avoid, you know, highly toxic chemical cleaners or Dranos and those kind of things. Being careful with your pharmaceuticals, so you know, taking your pharmaceuticals and making sure that they're being returned to your pharmacist if you're not going to use them, and also being mindful if you've got somebody who's heavily on pharmaceuticals, what that and or is going through cancer treatment, what that might be doing to your septic system, and consulting your township about options to deal with your wastewater during those times. And then the other one, just so it's not just about the septic system, we also, this is our time to think about the environment. And so we know that there's wastewater that's going to be flowing into the environment. And this is where some of these chemicals that we're thinking about, or we might think about putting down our septic system, we want to be careful with, because then they get released to the environment, and pharmaceuticals again come up there. And so then using your natural and phosphate-free soaps. I will emphasize the natural component here, so that there are phosphate-free soaps that have alternate chemicals that are called surfactants that lift. So phosphorus or phosphates are really good at lifting grime off materials. And so there are other chemical alternatives to phosphate that are just as chemically not as good. And so you kind of, let's emphasize the natural. Some folks have asked me for examples of that. there are companies in town that do though, and there's I'm kind of reluctant to call it any single company on that, but they're easily found. In terms of inputs, are small amounts of bleach and infrequent loads of laundry okay for septic? For sure. I mean, if you think about the volume of water that's in your septic system, you know, a small amount of bleach is going to be okay. So yeah, if you're putting large quantities of those kind of cleaners down, you want to be mindful. Around the tank, so septic tank system. You know, I think we've covered this quite well. So if there's any further questions about this, you can follow up with us on any questions, but we've covered that. And then the leaching field, we've also covered this. So keeping clear of thick vegetation, checking that it is whole, i.e. there's no slumping, there's no large holes or areas, and that there's even grass or vegetation growth. And then avoiding compaction of your septic bed. So no parking, don't put your boat, you know, that soccer team concept. This webinar is sponsored by the Township of the Archipelago, so just a call out to them. But I would also say that a number of municipalities are doing similar things within this area. So there's a whole township septic program that the municipalities have, and to varying different degrees on these points, but certainly the Archipelago has these things. So they've got a very solid building process and monitoring system that goes in, so ongoing tracking and monitoring of our systems, of the systems, through normal building permit processes. So they are a wealth of information and resource even on the communications and education side of things. Research and monitoring, so exploring and doing research. There was an earlier question I think that was asked around, you know, are class 4 systems appropriate? And so that's an ongoing question. So engaging in those questions is something that the municipality is doing and has done over the years. And just becoming better informed about what the septic risks are. And then the Council for the Archipelago has asked the staff at the township to continue to look and monitor septic age and renewal so that they're informed, so that continues. And then as well, in partnership with Georgian Bay Biosphere, we're looking at communication products to be used by ratepayers that can help get many of the questions that you're asking more readily available to the ratepayers in a very consumable fashion, and whether that's, you know, posters or cards for your bathroom so that your guests know what to do and how to use your septic. Those kind of things are being developed, and then also these kind of workshops and webinars. So if you've got other ideas of solid communication and education, we encourage you to reach out and send us an email. We always like to hear from folks. So there's some remaining questions, but other than that, that's kind of the content of this. And let's see, we've come up on an hour here. So we'll just kind of go through these last. The slides, yes, we can put them into a PDF and share them out. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not comfortable recommending a brand, but there are stores in town that do have, you know, good natural soaps and detergents. So, yep. Yeah. So Christian, I'll get back to you on whether there's a follow-up treatment that can be done in that case. But again, it is something that you do kind of want to watch out for. There are ways to manage folks that are undergoing chemo treatment and deal with that. So yes, for sure there are ways of doing that, and again, consulting with your building department and or a qualified septic installer can help with that. And yes, yeah, thanks, Heather. I agree. Being able to be right at a class 4 system would absolutely be fantastic. So, all right. So yeah, this is a thanks to everybody who attended this webinar. There are others that have been sponsored by the Township of the Archipelago that are coming up throughout the summer. And they're listed here, and you can, I'm sure an email will be going out to the group with those. And other than that, hope everybody's enjoying their summer and this cooler weather that's come in the last couple of days. And and hope the rest of your summer goes well.